Picture this, the world is on a knife's edge, teetering on the brink of nuclear war. It's the 1980s. The United States and the Soviet Union, two global superpowers, are locked in a terrifying stare-down. Now imagine an audio tape, just a regular-looking cassette, landing on the desks of intelligence agencies. This tape holds a recording between two world leaders that's so explosive, no pun intended. It suggests that one of the world leaders is ready to sacrifice an entire continent in a nuclear firestorm. But this wasn't some slick KGB plot. Nope. This was a handiwork of a British anarcho-punk band armed with nothing more than razor blades and a reel-to-reel tape machine. And to be fair, in the 80s, that was basically the punk starter pack. Just had a mohawk and a healthy distrust of authority. And their prank, born out of pure anti-war fury, didn't just embarrass governments, it actually fooled the CIA, sent shockwaves through the highest levels of power, and for one terrifying moment, nudged the world just a bit closer to the unthinkable. Before we get started, be sure to hit the bell notification icon and put all notifications on. I hear from a lot of my subscribers that they don't even get notifications when I post my videos. I would greatly appreciate if you guys did that. It's 1980s Britain, a place where everything feels like it's about to snap. Margaret Thatcher, the Iron Lady herself, is running the show, feuding with unions and selling off anything that isn't nailed down, and pushing her brand of conservatism. Unemployment through the roof. Streets buzzing with protests and strikes, the kind of unrest you can really feel in your bones. And hanging over all of this is the Cold War, that constant icy dread, nuclear panic cranked to 11. Remember those protect and survive pamphlets, the ones that basically told you to hide under a table and hope for the best if the bombs dropped? That sums up the mood perfectly, not much different from today. Anxious, tense, and just a little bit absurd. Into this pressure cooker steps the group Crass. Formed in 1977 at Dial House, this communal open house out in Essex, Crass were way more than just a band. They were an art collective, a living political statement, pretty much a whole way of life. Crass weren't just another punk band. They basically invented anarcho-punk, taking all the spit and fury of classic punk and injecting it with a razor-sharp, unapologetic anarchist message. Their sound, it was pure chaos, raw, jagged, and completely unfiltered, blasting away at everything they saw as rotten. War, mindless consumer culture, sexism, racism, religious double standards, and the whole machinery of the state. There was no holding back. Every track was a sonic Molotov cocktail aimed straight at the heart of the establishment. Their gigs, forget about your standard punk show, these were full-on political flashpoints, with the band throwing their weight behind causes like the campaign for nuclear disarmament and standing shoulder to shoulder with striking miners. Every night was a call to arms, a reminder that music could be a weapon and a rallying point for anyone willing to shake things up. Suddenly it's 1982 and the Falklands War explodes between Britain and Argentina. Thatcher was riding high on a wave of victory, and Britain was caught up in a fever dream of flag-waving nationalism. But for Crass and the rest of the left, it was nothing short of a nightmare, a pointless bloodbath dressed up as patriotism, a war over an island that had more sheep than people, with lives thrown away for political points. The band didn't just oppose the war, they saw Thatcher's whole approach as reckless. That fury, combined with a wild rumor that started making the rounds, set Crass on a collision course with history fueling their boldest and most infamous act of punk sabotage yet. The Falklands War was over, but the political fallout and the human cost were still hanging heavy in the air. Crass, already deep in their anti-war activism, heard this really disturbing rumor. According to Penny Rimbaud, one of Crass's founders, whispers were going around that the British Navy had deliberately let one of its destroyers, HMS Sheffield, get hit and sunk by an Argentinian missile. And the alleged reason? To protect Prince Andrew, who was supposedly serving on another ship, HMS Invincible, and also to whip up public support for the war. Protecting Prince Andrew. Boy, that line hasn't aged well. This was the kind of bombshell that should have blown up headlines, but good luck getting the mainstream press to touch it, especially if you're Crass, already branded as public enemy number one by the establishment. The band was sick of being stonewalled and even more fired up to take down Thatcher, especially with the 1983 general election coming up. So they decided to go full punk sabotage. We wanted to come up with something which might get rid of Thatcher, Rimbaud later admitted. Their solution? Cook up a fake phone call between Thatcher and Ronald Reagan, something so outrageous it couldn't be ignored. So here's how Crass decided to blow the doors off the establishment. They hatched a plan so gutsy it bordered really on absurd, and they fabricated a leaked phone call between Thatcher and Reagan, two biggest political heavyweights of the era. And the magic? It wasn't high-tech wizardry, just pure old-school DIY grit. They grabbed whatever they could get: tapes of Thatcher and Reagan's speeches, a battered reel-to-reel recorder, a couple of razor blades, and some splicing tape. The band sliced up words and phrases with surgical precision. We're talking about painstakingly chopping out single syllables, then gluing them back together like a ransom note for the airwaves. To top it off, they layered in some classic telephone static and clicks, making the whole thing sound like a real late-night back channel between two world leaders. Well, it was an audio Frankenstein so convincing it sent intelligence agencies into a tailspin and punk fans into fits of laughter. Crass didn't pull any punches with their fake phone call. They went straight for the jugular, crafting a conversation that was pure political dynamite. On the tape, Reagan is chillingly nonchalant, tossing around talk about deploying missiles in Western Europe and calling the continent a theater or even a guinea pig for a nuclear showdown with the Soviets. But it gets even darker for Thatcher. The doctored audio has her coldly admitting that the sinking of the HMS Sheffield was no accident, but a deliberate move, a pawn sacrificed to up the stakes in the Falklands War. She's heard basically shrugging off the loss, calling the ship expendable, while Reagan cracks jokes about it, and Thatcher worries about the PR fallout.
Pilot restraint. It's absolutely essential the area be through the roof.
The whole thing was engineered to make both leaders look like cartoon villains, ruthless, scheming, and perfectly willing to gamble with lives and global peace if it meant scoring political points. They didn't just hand the so-called Thatchergate tape to a friendly journalist or leak it through the usual punk channels. They went full shadow operation. The band quietly mailed out cassettes to about everyone who might cause a stir. Major newspapers from London to New York, embassies, political groups, and press agencies all over Europe as well as the US. No return address, no manifesto, no one stepping up to claim credit. It was just a plain package with a tape inside that was designed to look like a hot piece of black market intelligence. The whole move was classic Crass, anonymous, subversive, and guaranteed to make the powers that be sweat. When the Thatchergate tape hit the public in 1983, it was like tossing a Molotov cocktail into the heart of the Cold War paranoia, exactly the kind of chaos Crass would have scribbled in their dream journal. The press, always on the hunt for the next big spy scandal, pounced. Heavy hitters like the San Francisco Chronicle in the United States and the Sunday Times in the UK ran with the story, and here's the kicker. They didn't just laugh it off as some prank by a bunch of anarchists. Nope, the first wave of coverage treated the tape as deadly serious. A slick, possibly KGB-engineered piece of Russian disinformation that was tailor-made to mess with NATO and shake public faith in Western leaders. With tensions already sky-high, the timing couldn't have been juicier for conspiracy theories and finger-pointing. Crass had set the trap, and the world basically walked right into it. Once the media caught wind of the Thatchergate tape, things escalated fast. What started out as a weird anonymous cassette landing in the mailrooms suddenly blew up into a full-on international crisis. No longer just punk mischief, but a headline-grabbing security scare. Suddenly you had the US State Department, MI6, and the CIA all scrambling to figure out where the thing came from. Everyone in the intelligence world was on high alert, convinced they were dealing with a next-level act of enemy propaganda. The rumor mill went into overdrive. Was this the work of the KGB or maybe the Argentinian intelligence service, still upset over their defeat in the Falklands War? Either way, the tape had the world's most powerful spy agencies chasing their own tails, and Crass couldn't have scripted a wilder reaction if they tried. Years later, when the UK government finally declassified the files, it turned out Thatcher's top brass were seriously sweating it. Her closest advisors were so spooked they actually debated whether she would go on national TV just to squash the rumors head on. The wildest part of the story, just by forcing the CIA and MI6 to drop everything and chase down the tape's origins, Crass scored a massive win. With nothing but a reel-to-reel and some razor blades, they managed to yank the attention of the world's most secretive agencies. No budget, no resources, just pure DIY chaos. The real panic wasn't about the actual words on the tape, but what it signaled: that a couple of punks could punch a hole in the wall of national security, launch a new era of information warfare, and make the unthinkable suddenly feel possible. At first, the intelligence agencies went into full-blown crisis mode. Sirens blaring, everyone convinced that the Thatchergate tape was some kind of high-level KGB operation out to mess with the West. But as the dust settled and the analysts gave the tape a closer listen, cracks started to show. The language, while sharp, felt a little off, and the splicing wasn't quite slick enough for a top-tier spy job. The Reagan speech was actually spliced from a speech that the president gave on nuclear disarmament in 1982. It was unclear where the Margaret Thatcher speech or interviews came from. With the KGB theory losing steam, suspicions started drifting into a new direction. Instead of pointing fingers at Moscow, investigators began looking at homegrown troublemakers, UK left-wing groups who had a serious axe to grind with Thatcher and Reagan. In the end, it was the tape's raw DIY sloppiness, the very thing that made it so punk, that tipped people off to its real origins. But the definitive breakthrough didn't come from some government agency. It actually came from some good old-fashioned investigative journalism. So in January of 1984, more than a year after the tape first started making the rounds, journalists from the British newspaper The Observer managed to trace the hoax back to its incredibly unlikely source, Crass. How exactly they cracked it isn't entirely clear, but it's plausible that someone familiar with Crass's hardcore anti-establishment views, their artistic methods, and their knack for provocative actions just put the two and two together. Eventually, Crass couldn't keep the secret any longer, and they owned up and they admitted they were the masterminds behind the Thatchergate tape. The confession sent shockwaves through the political and media elite, who suddenly realized they'd been played by a group of anarcho-punks working out of a commune, not some shadowy foreign agent. The media quickly dubbed the scandal Thatchergate, riffing on Watergate, though this time the fallout was much more about embarrassment than any real political collapse.
A British punk rock group is claiming they're behind a fake tape recording which fooled the CIA. The American intelligence agency thought it was part of a Soviet disinformation plan. Here's Andrew Parkinson.
The genuine voices of Mrs. Thatcher and President Reagan. Through the crackles, he seems to be saying he'd fire missiles at his allies to keep the Soviets back behind their borders during a war. You mean Germany, Mrs. Thatcher incredulously replies. But it's all a fake, made by punk rock group Crass. Band member Andy Palmer.
We cut up two speeches, one of Reagan and one of Thatcher, sent the tape anonymously to the continent with a covering note saying that it was a recording of a crossed line.
The tape came into the hands of the CIA, who studied it and then issued a statement saying it was part of an increasingly sophisticated Russian disinformation campaign. Now the CIA is clearly embarrassed by its mistake. But why did Crass do it?
People know that governments are corrupt. People know that governments are violent. We did the tape to show that they're also small-minded, petty and stupid. For the CIA to issue that statement shows just how petty they are.
Now the group's touring the States, giving interviews about how easily they fooled the West's largest intelligence network.
British Rail services into Victoria and...
Despite all the international panic, wasted resources, and frantic investigations, Crass somehow managed to dodge any real legal blowback. Maybe the authorities figured that dragging the band into court would just pour gasoline on the fire, giving Crass exactly the kind of attention that they've been craving. Or maybe once it turned out the whole thing came from a ragtag punk collective instead of enemy spies, the supposed threat just evaporated and everyone decided to quietly move on. The Thatchergate tape was without a doubt Crass's most infamous stunt, but it was hardly an isolated incident in their bigger campaign of political activism and artistic provocation. Their whole existence was a middle finger to the status quo. Operating from Dial House, which was an open-door community hub, they lived and breathed the DIY punk ethic, controlling every single aspect of the creative output, from music production to artwork to manifestos. Rimbaud looked back on why they made the tape, saying, "We wanted to come up with something which might get rid of Thatcher. It was a failure. Thatcher got back in, but it did cause an enormous stink, like the Americans were furious." The Thatchergate tape was an analog forerunner to the kind of information warfare that now plays out on a global scale. So what do you guys think about Crass's methods? Was it a brilliant act of political protest, or was it just a reckless political stunt that could have gone horribly wrong? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. And if you guys enjoyed this journey into the bizarre crossroads of punk rock and the Cold War paranoia, please give this video a thumbs up. It really helps out the channel. We'll see you guys later on Rock and Roll True Stories.